process?
Yeah, first we make a photo. Yeah, first we make a photo under the screen first, because we have committee members in there, and then we go outside.
Yeah. We always follow her.
Okay.
You follow her all the time. Success. I have a glass of water. I need a pen.
First there, under the screen, only with the committee and the then us,
Hello? Hi, guys. Yay, good afternoon. Can I start my layman's talk? Not that you don't know about my research, but still. First of all, thank you so much for coming. I know it's a very not nice weather. I felt it myself, my hair was everywhere. But thank you so much for coming. I would like to tell you a little bit about what I did in the last few years of my PhD. And yeah, here I am. So I want to take you on a journey. So I would like you to first, just for a second, imagine you are in a disaster. So what would you do if you are in a disaster? What it is that you first want to do? Just think about it. Just take 10 seconds and think, what would you do? Okay, well, I would personally try to contact my loved ones. And actually, a few weeks back, I was in Nepal, and luck has it, I actually experienced an earthquake. It was 2 in the morning, and my bed started shaking, the room was shaking, and I don't think it was more than 10 seconds, but it was enough for me to jump out of my bed, go onto the table, and start calling my family. So the first thing that I think everyone wants to do when they are in a disaster is to make sure that they inform their family members that they are okay. They want to make sure that they have access to information, because information gives you a lot of power. It gives you opportunity to stay safe. It gives you opportunity to make decisions. So that's what my PhD is about. It is about finding ways how we can empower people who are at ground zero, citizens, people like you, people like me, and to give them tools that they can use to communicate, to make decisions, to help each other. So what exactly is a disaster situation? What is the context we are discussing here? Disaster means that you have the infrastructure down, and by infrastructure you mean not just your telecommunication infrastructure, but also your power infrastructure. So you don't have electricity, you don't have roads, your roads are broken. It makes disaster rescue and recovery very difficult, especially right after a disaster like earthquakes or flood or tornadoes. It only means that we need to find ways to work with whatever that is left with us. And most of the time I don't have my phone here with me, but most of the time we are left with our phones. And how can we use our phones to make connections or communicate? Now, the question is, is this really new? I mean, disasters are not new. They have been here forever. communication systems are here forever. So why is it that in 2022 I'm standing here and still discussing how can we communicate? Because there are ways to communicate. But still, in 2018, when UN OCA did a survey, out of the 10 most important things, the 2 most important things that they found was how do we democratize data access? How do we make sure that people have access to communication facilities? And how do are the current systems that are in place actually useful? So that was one of the most important things. And this is, by the way, 2018, when we have smartphones and we have already been to Mars. So why is it that we still don't have simple ways or more, I would say, cost-effective ways of allowing people to communicate? So that's where this project started. So of course, like every other PhD, I looked at what have others done, because we always want to build further. So I looked at some of the communication systems that are currently in use. And right now you have 2 of these. One is there are actually tons and tons, but I'll just like to focus on 2 of these. One is FireChat and another one is Serval Mesh. They are very different, yet they serve the same purpose. They are example of peer-to-peer systems. So remember this term peer-to-peer systems, because you might hear that quite a lot when we have the professors here. So what does that mean? It means a peer-to-peer system allows your phone to connect with your peer. So you connect using your Bluetooth or your Wi-Fi directly with your peer, and your peer connect with another people. So a self-organized system emerges. It just comes into being. And we don't use infrastructure at all. So then why the hell am I doing this PhD? It could be why? The question is, Serval Mesh over here is an extremely good system designed in New Zealand. What they do is they have a set of equipment, they put it on trees, and then that creates an access point. And then people from one island to another island without infrastructure can send messages to each other. Excellent, very good. Unfortunately, not every part of the country has as few people as New Zealand and not as much as money as New Zealand. Well, that's one of the problems. So we cannot always think that we will have equipment. And even if we can have equipment, normal people, mango people, like you and me, we cannot afford these equipment to put on trees. So we will have to still wait for rescue operators to come and then put these equipment on trees or on poles or whatever that is still standing. And then we have to wait for this communication system to be somehow organized. And then we have to be told, how do I use this system so that I can talk? This will take at least 3 days, generally. Maybe sometimes weeks, sometimes months, dependent on how remote your place is. If you are somewhere in a very difficult terrain like Nepal, then it can sometimes take months. So that's Serval Mesh. Then there is FireChat. This came into existence after the Hong Kong riots. So you might be well aware that there are a lot of regimes in this world where the government decides you are no longer allowed to talk, you are no longer allowed to communicate and express your views. So what do? They switch off the communication infrastructure, and then they wait that you cannot express your opinion. So FireChat came into existence because of that. What they do is that they allow people to make as many connections as they can. Everybody turns off their Wi-Fi, everyone connects with people around me, and then we have a fully connected network, and then boom, you can send messages to each other without needing any infrastructure. Very good, problem solved. So the core of these both technique is that you need density of people, you need a lot of people to be, one, willing to participate, and second, that they have phones with certain capabilities, and your phones also need enough amount of battery to be able to run these apps. So then what is the problem, you may ask? Well, like again, because I work in TPM, one of the methodologies that we usually use is to make simulations. Now, simulations gives us a way to understand or specifically study the behavior of a system. So that's what I did. I made a simulation of a fire chat. Okay? So here it is a simulation of a fire chat. I want you to focus on the screen over here. As you can see, these are around 500 people, by the way. So what I did, I set 500 people in a space like Delft. And then I gave them phones, and these phones are having different amount of batteries. And then what I did was that I let them make connections as if they had fire chat and they wanted to send messages to each other. So I'll play the simulation for you. And I want you to notice what happens. We are looking here at three main people, one with a lot of battery charge, someone with very low battery charge, which is red, and someone somewhere in between. So as you can see here, once you are sending a lot of messages, and because people are relaying messages for you, people with very low battery charge eventually run out of the network very quickly. Now they have nothing to communicate. It doesn't mean that the infrastructure has come up. It just means that their right to communicate in this infrastructureless ad hoc communication network is gone. Meanwhile, the people with a lot of battery are still there, but who are they going to connect with? Because all the people in the middle who were relaying messages for them are all gone because they don't have phones anymore. So this is a very important problem because remember, in a disaster, you don't have ways to charge your phones. So how do we solve this? What do we call this? Given that we have so many solutions, how do we make sure that we can find a way for people to remain connected in a fairer manner so that everybody, irrespective of how much battery they have in their phones, irrespective of the disparity of the quality of their phones, they can still remain connected. So that is the challenge that I took up in this PhD, and I designed my system, which I call Self-Organization for Survival, which is there, and that's the book. So if you want to learn about the algorithm, I designed 3, actually 4. Then you should focus, maybe you would want to focus on chapter 4. That is the main chapter. That's where the algorithm is explained. But before I could explain the algorithm, let's see what exactly happens here. So imagine the same situation. We are in Delft, 500 people, all trying to communicate, sending messages to each other, and now we are trying to focus on 3 people like we did in the previous simulation. Person with very high battery, green, person with very low battery, red, and somewhere in between is yellow. So as you can see here, this network is not as busy. One of the reasons this network is not as busy is because I have reduced the number of connections people make. How I do that, I can explain that later, but maybe I'll need more than 15 minutes. But then you also see that the energy is going very gradually. So even though people have very different amount of energies, they are still prolonging the time that they are communicating with each other. This is is the reason why we were able to achieve participatory fairness, which was the main goal of this thesis. How do we elongate the longevity of phone communication, irrespective of how much battery you have? So the question could be, how did you do this? I know, right? Cool. Well, read the paper, read the chapter 3, but I'll just give you a little bit of hint that we are going to discuss here. I used context awareness, which also forms one of the proposition over here in, let's say, 7, where I say both people and complex systems can embrace self-organization and context awareness for resilience. So what is context awareness? Context awareness is your ability to make decisions based on your surrounding. So what I did was that I gave each of these phone with SOS the power to make decision, the power to decide, do I really need to connect with everyone, or do I need to connect with only one person who has the highest battery power? And this person can maybe bear the load of relaying messages for everyone else. But of course, at some period, this person will have a lower energy. So then this person switches with someone else because people move in and out. So then this adaptive self-organization make sure that everybody else who is capable of relaying can relay, and people who can't are on the edges. By this, we elongate the longevity. This is like a very abstract view of what I did, but given the time we have, that's all I can say. Well, next, I kind of studied what it would mean to deploy this communication system, in a disaster situation, which was one of the main contribution. Will it actually allow participation? I will not run this simulation because I think we are running out of time. So I will quickly move on to my contributions. So why it is that they are giving me this PhD, which is the second part? Well, one, because I did a very extensive literature survey for the last 20 years of all communication systems that are present. And I found out what is that it was missing and how we can improve them. Second, I designed a protocol, which I think made a little bit things better. And then I enhanced it so that we can include this protocol with government, so that we can switch and include people who are immobile and living in places where there is existingly no infrastructure. Well, to be honestly, that was not enough. That's what they told me. Well, the thing was that one of the main thing that makes my thesis different from other theses was that in a systems point of view, if you look at a system, designers always focus on operational qualities. So is the performance good enough? Is all the mathematics going on? What we always forget is that we make systems for people. Systems are supposed to deliver certain values. That's why we make socio-technical systems, because they are set in society. And my contribution was that I introduced values such as participatory fairness, inclusion, and continuity, and I showed a way how you can actually define them, quantify them, and evaluate them. So that's what I did, and you can read about that in chapter 5 and 6. Now, I know that this is also a ceremony where you will see a lot of people that you don't know, so I thought maybe it's good so that you know who we are going to talk. Basically, there will be these 4 people sitting here. 2 of them are not joining, I think. And then there will be 4 people who will be sitting here. So in the first people who are sitting here, we have Simon Dobson, with whom I am pictured here. That's 10 years ago for my master's from St. Andrews. I think he will be asked to ask the question first because he's coming from farthest, but I'm not sure. Maybe it will be Rob. So Rob is joining us online, and he will quiz me on systems engineering questions. Tina is going to ask me about disaster management because I talk a lot about disaster management, and most probably she will say you don't know anything about it because you have not done any stakeholders analysis. Let's see. Then we have Jeroen, who is going to grill me about value-sensitive design, I think. So that's going to be this side. And I will refer to all of them as Hokulerte opponent. Then we have on this side my supervisory team. So we have Martijn, my daily supervisor. We have Dirk Helbing and Francis Brazier. And we have Okje, who is the Dean of TPM, who will be chairing this session. Rest, we have the paronyms. So if you are interested in drinks and snacks after the event, then you should talk to those people over there. Yeah. And if I can take 1 more minute, I want to explain why this cover has a dandelion on top. Like, really, I do systems and values. Well, there is something very interesting about this dandelion, you know. Dandelions are one of the most smartest flowers on planet. You know why? Because they are context aware. They, based on the humidity and the wind drag in the environment, they actually make the most important decision of their life, to stay or to fly away. I think this is one of the perfect examples of what I designed. So that's why you have a dandelion, so now you know. And that was my time. Thank you.
I sit on this chair. I'll show you the mic for a moment because the technician showed me. Just pick it up and start talking.
Already. Okay.
No need to switch it on. It's automatically on. I'll take a look at the time. Hello, everyone. So we have 3 minutes left. Could we ask everybody, please, to take their seats and stop talking now? Fernando.
Ik open de zitting van de commissie ter beoordeling van het proefschrift en de stellingen van Indushree Banerjee, a Master of Science in Networks and Distributed Systems. De verdediging zal in het Engels worden gevoerd. I request the promovenda to go to the lectern together with the paronyms. A warm welcome to all of you at the public defense by the candidate of the dissertation entitled Self-Organization for Survival. Very clear title. Great. The Board of Doctorates of the TU Delft has installed a committee to evaluate the dissertation and the propositions. The committee will have a debate with the candidate in public. It is an honor to present the members of this committee, to whom I extend a hearty welcome. First, Professor Rob Vingerhoed is online from the University of Toulouse. Professor Simon Dobson of the University of St. Andrews. Professor Tina Comes online of the Delft University of Technology. And Professor Jeroen van den Hoven, also of the Delft University of Technology. And a warm welcome as well to the promoters, Professor Dirk Helbing of the ETH Zurich, Martijn Warnier of Delft University of Technology, and Francis Brazier, also of Delft University of Technology. Thank you all for taking part in this academic ceremony. My name is Aukje Hasselt. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management at this university, and it's my pleasure to chair this session on behalf of the Rector Magnificus. I would now like to start the opposition, and first give the words to Rob Vingerhoed. Please take the floor.
Sorry that I'm not able to be involved today. I would have loved to, but these days I will participate by screen and cameras and social media. I would like to start first of all to congratulate you on your great thesis. It was one of a very beautiful manuscript, and I will have a lot of pleasure reading it. Of course, also pleasure reading it also makes me really conscious. I got to see it at the end of the weekend. I wanted to try to follow this with my
waarde promovenda, is this question clear to you?
Yes, thank you. I would also request to increase the volume because I can hear very little
Oh, okay. Especially
of Rob.
of the online.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that.
I have heard the question.
Yeah, okay, that's a good remark. Yeah.
Gecolleerde
Then I'll give you the opportunity to defend yourself.
Gecolleerde opponent. First of all, I really appreciate that you took the time to read my thesis very thoroughly, because you do go page by page. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. So if I understand correctly, you're asking me why it is that I chose BLE over Wi-Fi Direct or maybe LoRaWAN. Well, I have looked at, like you have mentioned, the design choices. And one of my design choices is that I want to make sure that we require as less energy as possible to form connections, to send messages, and to reconfigure. And I did look at literature and compared BLE and Wi-Fi, and we did find that Bluetooth Low Energy was the lowest in terms of connecting and sending messages. The second reason was that we are still living in a world where not everyone has a phone that has Wi-Fi Direct, but Bluetooth being quite old, it is still possible to find very old phones with Bluetooth, which means that if in case we want to make SOS an application, it will be easier to roll it out to even most elementary phones. So these were the two reasons that I chose BLE.
And I started stories in the film and the discussion where he is actually comparing different technologies, and yes, you're right, and technology is less to be a medium of the wireless, the Wi-Fi server. But the reach, the nominal reach of BLE is very limited. It's limited to about 10 meters, what it says here in the philosophy. And I think that the reach would be an important factor as well. And the 10 meters probably is still a bit long, because I know when I come back from learning my mobile phone and my telephone, they only start talking to each other within maybe 3 or 4 meters. So my question now is, if I take one fly, which is in my way about 100 meters, if there was something to be within it, so is it a chance in a disaster situation where you need to connect to people you don't know where they are? Is there a bigger chance to connect into one of the plants? And the base is larger. So shouldn't we consider it somehow, maybe for the first few hours, consider a longer range? To be better for the energy users.
Thank you. If I understand correctly, you're asking me why it is that if I had considered the effect of transmission range on connectivity of these networks, I would like to say that yes, we have considered the effect of transmission range on the performance of forming the networks. And if I may refer to a particular figure here in the supplementary material. So, sorry, I think it is not here, but we did, it didn't make it to the publication. We did do a lot of testing on the effect of transmission range. I think there is one specific experiment that I did, which is in chapter 4 on varying the transmission range. And yes, I do agree with you that if you have a higher range, then you have more chances of finding people. It also means that if you have a higher range, that you have more number of options. So you might actually find more number of people who have maybe higher battery chance, energy. So it indeed would lead to a longevity. But in doing the assessment with the varying transmission range, we did see that one of the most important aspects was density. So even if we have a longer transmission range, if we do not have enough density, it really does not matter much. What matters is that you have enough people to form connections, and also that you have enough diversity of people with higher energy phones. So it would be interesting, of course, to make the communication maybe more context aware, where we want to understand if we can switch from Wi-Fi to Bluetooth. But there is one limitation, I would say, that if we want to, which is, by the way, one of the approaches of topology control, where we want to configure the transmission range, we want to increase or decrease the transmission range depending on how good performance we want. That is quite difficult to do for a general person, to go into the settings and figure out. I myself don't know how to do it. So I would not make a system that requires too much interventions from people. I would rather make a system that is easier to implement, given that we are in a disaster situation and people want to make many choices other than deciding on what transmission range is efficient, I would say. So that's why I chose the most available one, which is Bluetooth. I think the communication protocol was not only just meant to be able to connect, but also the purpose of the communication protocol is to ensure that we are able to send and receive as many number of messages we can. So even though the person is right next door, this person can still be able to relay the message for me. So in that sense, it still makes sense to remain connected to them and connect in a way so that we don't overexploit their energy.
I was wondering if there were not other options that could help us to extend the lifetime of the connection that we were able to. For example, one might say that we use pregnancy with system transmits different messages or disconnect temporarily for certain periods of time and then connect again so that we have battery time. For those considered, do you think it would be a good advantage, or do you think it is also not going to happen?
The mechanisms that you are proposing are mainly mechanisms that I found in wireless sensor networks. So energy efficiency is from wireless sensor networks, in hybrid networks and peer-to-peer networks. And my work is somewhere in between, where I cannot use what is used in wireless sensor networks, where there is a sink, where all the messages come. And depending on scheduling, we can put certain nodes to sleep and not transmit all the time. But we cannot do that necessarily during a disaster, because to know which nodes is in an imminent need of communicating at a particular time is quite difficult. So scheduling which person in a population needs to be disconnected and connected is, I think, is difficult. And it also, to an extent, is contradictory to the value that I design, where I say that I want to design for a value of remaining connected for as long as possible for everyone. So I would personally not do that. Of course, we can look into it, and it's an interesting topic, but it was not part of my research.
Only if it's very, very short. And a very, very short answer. Yeah.
Yes. If you look in when you connect many devices, how about the interface between different devices?
So,
In particular, as we are looking at very short range connecting, how does this work out?
so what I understand, you are referring to the congestion problem. So if you have too many devices in the close range and they're sending and receiving messages, then there will be congestion. Yes, I agree that there will be congestion. And then especially if you have a hub node that is supposed to be routing a lot of messages, then it will have quite a number of pending messages that it needs to route. So yes, indeed, that is a problem. However, because we dynamically switch from one hub to another, it should not be that it will exhaust one particular node for the most amount of time. So, and in the experiments that I did in the simulation, I have varied the message frequency from 1 to 10, and we did find that it was able to handle that, at least in the simulations.
Thank you. Professor? Yeah, Professor Fingerhut, are you satisfied with the answers to your questions?
Absolutely.
Thanks for the opposition. And I invite Simon Dobson to continue the opposition.
Thank you, mevrouw de rector. So, Father Promovenda, it's a great pleasure to see you again. It seems like a long time since you were in St Andrews. I think it actually is a long time since you were in St Andrews. And it's wonderful to see that you've come here and done such a significant thesis from having left us. Can I ask about the positioning of this work? Given that there are so many wireless protocols, why did we need another one for this particular use case? What is it about this that needs something new?
Ocular the opponent. First of all, thank you for remembering me. I think I'm seeing you after 10 years, so it's a great pleasure to see you. What I understand, you're asking me why it is so necessary that, given that we have so many energy efficient, specifically energy efficient protocols that are there in use, why it is that I decided to make another one on top of it. Well, I did a literature survey, although it was at the very end. I still did it. And I found that although there are quite a number of energy efficiency protocols, like I mentioned beforehand, they are all derivative from wireless sensor networks, and the main focus is to ensure that sensors are able to send messages to a sink. Now, these can be used in situations such as in a building where we want to monitor energy use. Or it can also be used in ecosystems where we want to monitor the increase or decrease of a species like tigers, per se. But when we talk about systems that are to be used in a particular context, such as disasters, then the game changes a lot. Because there, the situation is not necessarily about just conserving energy, but it is also about delivering certain values. And I think currently the state of the art that deals with designing communication systems specifically for citizens, like they claim, that there are certain assumptions that are made, and assumptions being there will be enough amount of equipment that the government will bring, assumptions being people will have, for example, in experiments, they don't diversify the existing battery that the phones have. Assumptions being it will be easier for people to change transmission range, for example. So these assumptions are not necessarily correct because disasters don't happen just in places where people are tech savvy, but also in places where people are not tech savvy. So it was important, hence, to design a system which was self-organized, easy to implement, and was capable of delivering certain values.
Okay. I mean, it is great to hear about sort of values coming into network protocols. I think this may be the first work I've ever read that does that. Can I ask a little bit about, I think this follows on from what Rob was saying earlier about one of the issues that we constantly have with mesh networking is that it tends to kill the nodes that are acting as hubs so much. They're getting so much traffic that their batteries run down. Can you discuss a little bit about how I think your adaptive scheme does address this. Can you perhaps discuss a little bit of how and how you think this, how you think it will preserve the lifetime of the network?
Do you want me to explain the entire algorithm or just... Well, I have... there are certain number of small details in here. So the way the SOS protocol works is that first it is context aware. What does that mean? That the choice to connect is very much dependent on is I'm connecting to a person who is capable of actually carrying this load. So that's the first thing. And second, that if that choice is made, it is not a permanent choice. It doesn't mean that a person who is a hub at one particular moment remains a hub for the entirety of the period. So it constantly keeps changing. The question is, how do I do that? Well, every node, when is here, starts questioning who is around me, depending on the transmission range, and ask for two information. One, how much energy do you have? How much energy do you have? And are you already connected to me or not? So that is because I also wanted to minimize the number of connections. By minimizing the number of connections, we are preserving a lot of energy. What is also negative in mesh, that we make a lot of connections. So hub networks not only lose messages because they are relaying a number of messages, but it is also because they are connecting a lot. So in SOS, we do two things. We reduce the number of connections. We only connect to one person at most. And second, we constantly adapt. So if at certain particular point we are trying to send a message and we realize that there is no route present because we ask for a route query, we ask the people who are connected to me in a very local, self-organized manner to redistribute, to reconfigure basically, and to find new nodes. In this process, which is the event-driven reconfiguration, we make sure that people who are no longer capable of actually carrying the burden are spared, so they go on the leave. People who have already left, those links are removed, and then we find someone new. The beauty of this is that in a space, people constantly move and out. Given the mobility, there is always someone new with a better battery, with a higher battery. So this switching happens from one hub to another hub automatically on its own based on a local distributed message exchange manner.
I think there's some interesting future work there, actually, to look at how the topology changes and just study that a little bit in the future. And can I ask you about the... When you move this, you've done some very thorough simulation studies of how your protocol behaves. What do you think will be the extra challenges if you were to move it out into reality? So you have to deal with very odd radio shapes, occlusion, variable membership, variable connectivity. Do you think there are additional things you would want to include for a protocol to actually before you need to deploy it?
I think this is a very interesting conversation we can have forever. But let's zone it down to a few things. Well, the thing is that I studied the behavior of a system that I designed. When this system is going to be implemented, if it is implemented, there will be a number of things that has to be considered. For example, in my simulation, I do not consider line of sight problem at all. I do not consider that we might be in different terrains. There can be elevation, there can be buildings. I also do not consider, I have just assumed that people are really willing to be part of this network. Nobody will ever say, okay, I don't want to be part of this network. So that might also happen, that there will be a subset of people who might be willing or might not be willing. It can also happen that, like I have simulated the density of different cities, and I have considered that they are uniform in a city, but that's not true actually. Densities of a city vary depending on where we are. So these are a number of things that has to be considered if it is to be implemented, and accordingly the system has to be tweaked.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are you satisfied with the answers
Very
to
much,
your
yes.
questions? Yes, great. Thank you for the opposition. And I invite Professor Tina Gomez to continue the opposition.
Thank you, lecturer. Rather cool lecture. I will always remember you because you were one of the first people I met to analyze the well. And you promised me already then to be part of your committee. So I'm very happy that we are here to cover it. And of course, thanks for sharing your work with me, and I also so very much like your thesis. And I definitely appreciate also your enthusiasm for the domain and the topic of disasters and disaster resilience. So my questions also go unsurprisingly into that direction, and of course you stressed before also how important the context is for your work. And I want to start with just asking you, the title of the thesis is Self-Organization for Survival. In your answer to Mr. Banerjee, you said the purpose of this system is actually to send and receive as many messages as we can. So my question is how far do we achieve survival, self-organization for survival, by just maximizing the number of messages?
Hokulerte opponent. Thank you, and thank you for keeping the promise that you are part of my PhD defense. Can I think a bit? So what I understand, you are asking me how it is that I said that the purpose of my protocol that I designed is to maximize the lifetime of nodes for sending and receiving messages is then...
Sorry, so you say, so one of your values at the time of the thesis is survival, self-organization for survival, and also it is one of the values that you promote, is that the system should promote survival. So that's central. And then in one of the replies you said, the purpose of your system and of your protocol, it is to send and receive as many messages as we can. And what I would like you to think about is the link between send and receive as many messages as we can and the survival.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. I had the opportunity to meet a lot of disaster experts, including you. And I have constantly I have read in literature and also constantly seen that the 72 hours after a disaster are considered golden period. So what is 72 hours? Is the first 3 days right after a disaster is struck. Citizens are left on their own, and we have to find ways to empower them. How can we empower them? Is to give them tools that let them coordinate. And how can they coordinate if they're able to send and receive messages? So in order to do that, this will increase their survival chances in case if they're stuck somewhere and they need to inform that I am stuck here, this is my location. They need to be able to use their phone. They need to be able to use their phone irrespective of how much battery they have, and they need to be able to receive the message that yes, we are on our way, you will be rescued. This was how I defined survival. I considered that it is important that in a community where people are there, in a disaster, it is important if we can maximize every single message that is sent, is received, and that's why I designed this. So in a complex system design perspective, one of the key performance indicators are, yes, we do want to maximize the reliability, scalability, and longevity of the networks, but when we do analysis with other existing networks, we also want to deliver values such as participatory fairness, inclusion, and continuity, where we are able to maximize message delivery. In the extended format of SOS, which is SOS hybrid, we have also considered areas that do not have infrastructure connectivity or so-called islands of inequity. We have enhanced it so that people still have a chance to receive emergency messages or rescue messages that they get from the government. So this is how I think my protocol can serve the purpose.
Yeah. Thank you. And you were also, of course, in your reply, just now saying, okay, a lot of systems and networks that actually see they make a lot of assumptions, and they're actually not fulfilled in these tasks. I just want to challenge you to reflect also on the assumptions that you yourself are making about the messages that are shared in disasters. Because you know that also, especially in disasters, information overload is a big problem. Misinformation, disinformation, potentially irrelevant information, we know that way for something information that is shared, they easily overload the network. But still, you make the choice not to prioritize any information. You also choose not to, for instance, look for coverage and say, okay, so we want to make sure that at least all the regions that are affected by disaster are somehow connected. We just say every message is equal. How do you justify that?
Thank you for this question. I do agree that this is an important concern and must be dealt with. It is true that not every single message is important in a disaster context. I would like to reiterate that one of the main fundamental challenges to design this network was to come up with a protocol that can enhance and fairly distribute resource utilization so that we have equal communication opportunities. And for I agree. My fairness, how I define fairness, is very different from what we call equal. And what you're suggesting is that I have treated every single message equally, of equal priority, of equal importance. Yes, that was a design choice because we wanted to see if we do an information overload, then can this network survive? Will it break? Or will it be able to handle the load, given that we are actually replacing mesh, which is much more robust, or has redundant routes? So will this network be able to handle the load of sending so many messages? That's why we did that. However, the prioritization of messages or selecting which message to send to which particular group was outside the scope of my research, so we did not look at it. But in my future work, I have said that it is very important to be investigated and should be investigated further. I would like to say that the SOS hybrid network does consider coverage. So in my experiments, I have actually introduced 4 infrastructures with different amount of coverage. And I have looked at people who are outside the coverage range. So in chapter 6 actually, if you look at this particular page number 178, we have these figures where you see that I have actually looked at different infrastructures with different ranges, and I have simulated people who are living outside the range, who are never covered. But SOS Hybrid, because of its switching topology network, was able to connect people who are immobile and people who are not in the coverage zone. So we did cover that. But of course, we didn't do the prioritization of messages.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with the answers to your questions?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the opposition. I invite Professor Jeroen van den Hoven to continue the opposition.
Dank u, mevrouw de rector. Waarde promovenda, congratulations with this wonderful piece of work. It's great to see that come to fruition, especially because we met very early on when you came to Delft. And so I also consider this to be the fruit-bearing part of a trajectory that we started with this wonderful program, Engineering Social Technologies for a Responsible Digital Future, some years ago. And you also managed to bring together a lot of the kind of core themes of our faculty. So it's interdisciplinarity, socio-technical systems, complexity, applied computer science, and all for the good of mankind. So that's exactly where we want to be. And of course, I'm very happy to see that this is turned into, this is how it could be framed, kind of an exercise in value-sensitive design. And I agree with my colleague that there are very few of these cases that treat the subject matter in that depth and try to connect values and requirements. But having said that, it's a little bit early for a laudatio. I have a couple of questions for you. And those pertain to your conceptualization of that framework, that design for values. You were shifting a little bit between different terminologies, but that's for the, let's say, the philosophical connoisseurs, value-based or value-sensitive or design for values. But we won't go into that scholastic debate. I'm more interested in how you arrived at that conceptualization that is so prominent in all your nice schemes, where you go from values to norms to requirements. And why in this way? Why not, for example, values replaced by principles or needs or rights or whatever obligations, and norms not be replaced by rules or protocols? So how did you come to this particular conceptualization? Not that I disagree with it, but just want to hear from you how you arrived at that.
Ocular the opponent. Thank you for this interesting question, and thank you for your kind words that you read this thesis so intently. If I understand correctly, you are asking me how it is that I conceptualize the values in this particular thesis.
No, why did you conceptualize it in terms of those three categories and not the alternative that I just mentioned, for example? Because it's three layers of abstraction.
Yeah.
Right? So why instead of values not principles, for example, or needs or duties or obligations? Or
I will try to answer this question. I have not thought of that as you have asked. Well, I have thought of it, but not in terms of needs. So when I started doing this research, and I was looking at the literature, I found many papers on, like we have discussed here, energy efficiency. And one of the things that comes again and again is that how do we improve performance? How do we make the bandwidth better, the throughput better, the delay better? But the question that I was not ever getting answered was that, why are we making this? Who is making this? And maybe the reason I actually myself looked into values was because I like values. I had certain values. And when I looked at the literature, I could see that, but if I have to use the system, I will not use this system because this does not speak to me. So why would I promote this to a community of people who might have different set of requirements? So from moving from requirements to norms to values, I personally realized that in certain cultures, at least, there is a lot of collective altruism where people want to help each other. And we can tap into that. We can tap into that resource by designing systems that tap into the values of that are inbuilt in the fabrics of a society. Participation or being capable of helping each other is a value that is ingrained in many parts of society, and it is easier to explain. Principles, on the contrary, are very difficult because people might have different principles, and it is quite individualistic level. Values on the level can actually be a cumulative, collective value. So that's why I thought values makes much more sense in this regard, where we are designing a system where the value actually, by the way, emerges. Is not there in the from the very initially, but it emerges. And this value that comes into play is because a certain need is arised. So the need of being able to remain connected despite the disparity arises at a particular context. that need might not be true all the time, but the context requires that need, and the context requires the value. So that's why I came into this.
Good, thank you very much. You talk about moving from one to the other, let's say from the level of the values to the norms to the specific requirements. You have a nice, on page 49, you have this nice table. And so, but can you be more specific about the moving around in that table? So what is the logic that propels the moving here? So what's the logical relationship?
The reason or the logical relationship in order to move from values to norms to the example design requirements was because at the end of the day we're designing a system. Sure. So in order to quantify the values, we have to understand what exactly it is that it means in terms of system values.
Yeah, but what it means, so it's a semantic, what is it? What is it, a kind of implication, or what kind of... So for example, I'm asking because I'm interested in finding out or knowing when something that appears in the middle column is the wrong specification of, and I'm already giving part of the answer away, that's I'm filling in for you, that it's a specification. So what's the criteria for what surfaces or emerges in a particular column as a token item in those?
Well, I looked at, for example, the values that were already defined previously.
Right. So how do we reason? So what's the type of reasoning that's going? How would you characterize that?
I think for my reasoning was based on the requirements that were already being given by the stakeholders. So if I design a system, so it was from the both ways. It was not necessarily top down or bottom up, but it was both ways. So I looked at the values that are there, that are already being defined in value-sensitive design, and then I looked at all the requirements that are there that we need to fulfill, and then it was a matter of matching, is this actually requirements speaking about a certain value? But because the moment we put in that, then we have to think, how do we quantify it, how do we measure it, and how do we deliver it? So that's how I came into this. And of course, the norms are from the literature. The norms are from the experts who talk about, who have been on fields and have talked to disaster survivors and rescue operators on what are the norms and what are their requirements. So that's how this table came into being.
Okay, thank you very much. So it also, you have excluded, you have limited or excluded privacy, security, and I would also add dual use, right? From your studies. And so I wonder whether the, let's say the harmonious, all of these values that you talk about, like well-being or inclusion, participation, they all seem to be fairly, harmonious. You don't run into too many kind of value conflicts. Is that a function of the fact that you have chosen to exclude these other ones that could play a very important role when, for example, this is really applied in the real world, because many of the disasters are taking place in areas that are rife with conflict, armed conflict, tensions, etc., where you would expect these things to be in tension, let's say, because of the constraints, confidentiality and privacy and security.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. The other thing that I wondered about is one of the advantages of this design approach, both the value-sensitive design and the research by design, is that you, at an early stage, you have these kind of conceptual designs or prototypes that you then can put on the table for stakeholders and to consult and give feedback on. Do you have any clue or idea about what that would consist of? Do you have any sense of that?
Well, I have
a broad range of stakeholders, not only the...
Yes. Well, I think, I don't think. I mean, I have designed, we have different stakeholders, right? We have stakeholders who are actually going to implement the system if they want to. Then we have stakeholders who are going to use the system. And then we have stakeholders, they are going to maybe discuss the policies of what does it mean to implement the system. So at its current form, I have a set of algorithms. that if somebody wants, as a designer, can convert that into an app. I also have a visualization with the simulations that we can actually show to prove a point that why it is necessary to have this kind of systems and what are the implications if we do not consider certain values. So what would happen? So these are the two things we have as of now. And of course, I have papers that if future researchers want to read and want to consider what kind of systems to choose from, because I have done also an extensive literature survey, and I have shown there what are the existing applications that are being used and for what purposes and where it is that they do not serve their limitations. So if somebody wants to choose from that, they can also refer to that paper. So these are the artifacts that comes out of this research.
Thank you very much. Mevrouw de Rector.
Professor Van der Hoven, are you satisfied with the answers to your questions? Yeah. Thank you for the opposition. And I now invite one of the promoters, Professor Helbing, to continue the opposition.
Waarde promovenda. I was also very happy with this thesis, I should say. It's a thesis that puts a focus on what values can do for society. In many cases, it's assumed or claimed that if we have to consider values, it's restricting our possibilities. So what should constraints be good for? But you have shown that fairness would have a collective effect that's beneficial for all. So it has an empowering effect. It adds to the performance of the system to the benefit of everyone. And I think that's very insightful, and I hope it will inspire many more works in that direction where we can learn how values empower society to thrive. Not only in crisis situations, hopefully the number of crisis situations will be low, but coming to my first question, in view of the holy crisis that we're in, the European Commission has just released a document on strategic crisis management for the EU. There has also been a complementary document on values in times of crisis. What would you have written into these documents?
Hooggeler, the promoter. I would like to express my gratitude for the kind words you said and for guiding me all through this dissertation. It's an interesting question, only if I had that power. But, okay, so the question is, what would I say if I am one of the persons who is suggesting what shall we do for crisis? I personally think is that it is very important for all kinds of policies to be very inclusive. We are a diverse society, and we are moving towards more diversity because given climate change, we will have more people who will have to migrate from one place to another, which means they will have different set of requirements and their needs will be very varied than what we understand because we don't know them. It is important for us to understand them. And it is very important that when we design for inclusivity, we have a very comprehensive understanding of diversity. What does that mean? And then only we can design for inclusivity. So one of the things would be to be inclusive. Second would be, again, equality is not fairness. We should not expect that every single person or nation should have the equal contribution towards a problem or a person, because we all start from different stages or with different privileges. So I think we should focus more on equity and then, of course, move towards that. And I think when you hired me, you asked me a question, I still remember that. You asked me if you were to make if you were given the power, what would you change in the world? I said I would make sure that all women are educated and they're given same equality as men. I still think even in crisis situations, it is women who suffer the most, and it is very important that they are given equal amount of rights and power to make changes. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. You've also included 10 very interesting propositions in your thesis, and I like them very much. In particular, proposition number 4, in fact, addresses one of the points that you have elaborated on a bit just a few moments ago. And this proposition says, designing for inclusivity mandates a comprehensive understanding of diversity. Could you perhaps elaborate that a bit more? So, what different dimensions does diversity have? Which ones do we need to consider? And what do we need to understand about it? And what then has this for implications for design?
Thank you for this question. When I wrote this proposition, well, first of all, I am an Indian who is living in the Netherlands, and I have lived in Scotland for a while, and I go back and forth in different countries for work, for travel, and what I have experienced myself is that how we express our needs is very much dependent on our cultural biases, on our communication styles. So when designers sit together with a set of stakeholders, and they could be from anywhere, from any culture, it is very important to understand how it is that they express their needs and their demands. And if we do not understand that, then we will not be able to actually formulate them into requirements. So it is very important to, first of all, understand the diversity that is inherent in a society that we go and we want to create a solution for. That might be a very different style of communication itself. People might be too polite to say, we need this, or people might be just very frank to say, we do not need this. But to think that everyone will behave exactly the same way is not convenient and will not lead to a comprehensive understanding. Diversity also refers to diversity in age. So the needs of an older generation is very different. Their skill sets are very different. Diversity also refers to access to information and education. And that means that their skill sets in terms of what they can use and what they cannot use differs. So when we design solutions, we have to understand who are we designing it for. Diversity can also mean that there can be gender diversity in how much accessibility is inherent there, what is allowed. In certain cultures and countries, certain things might not be allowed, and people might not use them. So these are all diversity that are kind of hidden sometimes, and it is convenient to let them be, to design systems with assumptions, thinking, okay, this will just work, like we see in these communication systems. We just assume that people will have very good phones, lots of battery, everybody charges it right before the disaster, good. 100% battery, no problem. And in experiments, we see the same. We don't diversify the amount of battery. We don't even diversify the idea that it might not be possible for every person on the world to actually buy a new phone. So that's the case. So that's why this proposition came from there.
Thank you very much. I have a further question. So, do you think fairness is something given or to be imposed on a social system, or may it be a systemic property that would come about by self-organization if the right kinds of interactions were in place?
Fairness is very subjective. It really depends on who you ask and how they define fairness. Someone can say fairness is about equality, equal size of pies for everyone. Someone can say, no, that's not fairness. I have diabetes, I don't want a pie. Give me a sugar-free pie. So fairness is very difficult to justify in that sense. So, and I do not think that fairness is given and that it can be achieved on its own. I think fairness has to be understood, first of all, where people are coming from and what is the common resource pool, if we talk here. And when we are distributing it, do we really need to give everybody equal? Or are there people who needs maybe more and some people might need less? So it is something that has to be designed. That is something that has to be consciously made available. It does not appear on its own. However, it would be interesting to see in certain societies where self-organization might lead to a more fairer society. I am not saying that it's impossible, but it would be to, I would just speculate because I don't know about it. It might be that it happens, but actually it doesn't. I once read a very interesting paper, and it was by the selfish gene, and there they talked about how animals are categorized into three, like people who take, and people who don't hold grudges, and people who are like givers. So there it might be a problem where we will see that a certain people who is giving will just get extinct, and then we will be left with only grudges. So that might also be a case which they have studied in simulations.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy with the answers, and I would be happy to hand it over.
Thank you for the opposition. And I invite Professor Martijn Warnier to continue the opposition.
Yes. Waarde promovendus. I of course also want to congratulate you with a very nice piece of work. I think something you can be very proud of. I want to start with a question about the title. I think it's a very nice title, Self-Organization for Survival. And you very cleverly, I think, refer with your self-organization to at least two different forms of self-organization. So maybe for the audience, could you please make this explicit? What are these two forms of self-organization that you refer to in the title?
Oculerte promoter. Thank you. Thank you for that. So the title here is Self-Organization for Survival. Self-organization is an approach in this book where I use self-organization in order to make a self-organized network. So if phones are context aware, then a self-organized communication network emerges. What it also does is that it gives people to self-organize themselves. So a self-organization approach for self-organization during survival is what it is for. So although it would be weird to name your thesis self-organization for self-organization, so we change it to self-organization for survival.
Okay, thank you for making that explicit for me. Then I come to my next question that is related to this. Which of these two forms of self-organizations form the core of the work in your thesis? Is it the first one or the second one?
The core of the thesis is the first one, where self-organization is an approach. It facilitates self-organization, so the motivation is to facilitate self-organization, but the core is to design a protocol that is self-organized in itself. So using context awareness, a self-organized, completely self-healing network arises and emerges, and it maintains throughout as long as there are people communicating with each other.
Okay, then maybe quickly.
Thank you, Madam Wiedel. I request the promovenda and the paronyms to take their seat again. The committee will this. The committee will withdraw for further deliberation in the committee room. The session is adjourned. I reopen the session and ask the promovenda and the paronyms to stand in front of the committee. Het College voor Promoties van de Technische Universiteit Delft, vertegenwoordigd door de hier aanwezige commissie, heeft, na kennis te hebben genomen van uw proefschrift met stellingen en na uw verdediging daarvan te hebben gehoord, met inachtneming van het bepaalde in de Wet op het Hoger Onderwijs en Wetenschappelijk Onderzoek, besloten u de graad te verlenen van dokter. Ik verzoek de promotor, door het College voor Promoties als zodanig aangewezen, zich wel van de haar opgedragen taak te kwijten.
Uit kracht van de bevoegdheid bij dit toegekend aan het College van Promoties, verklaar ik namens dat college, hier vertegenwoordigd door de rector magnificus en de overige leden van de commissie, bij deze u, Indushree Banerjee, te bevorderen tot dokter en u alle rechten te verlenen welke aan de dokterstitel zijn verbonden. Ten bewijze hiervan overhandig ik u het diploma dat u het recht geeft de titel dokter te voeren, ondertekend door de rector magnificus en de 3 promotoren, voorzien van het zegel van Technische Universiteit Delft.
It is the promoter's privilege to be the first to congratulate the young doctor. Professor Brazier, the floor is yours.
Dear Dr. Banerjee, dear Indushree, it's my pleasure to say a few words on behalf of Professor Vanier and Professor Helbing, myself too. Congratulations. Your husband, parents, sister, in-laws, friends, colleagues, the committee, you've all just witnessed Indushree at her best, passionately discussing the essence of her work, her position, her research. I know we're all proud of what you've accomplished. But most of all, you should be proud. You've done so well. We've had the pleasure of accompanying you on this journey, the journey of becoming an independent researcher. You've embraced the challenges of interdisciplinary research, and you've thrived. Even during the pandemic, when you were working from home with your husband and sister very near. Your balcony an oasis of flowers and vegetables, greenery, amazing. Your parents were physically far away, but they were very close to you, and they still are. They're very close to you at heart. They're here today. You started as one of the PhD students when the Engineering Social Technologies for Responsible Digital Future program, initiated by Professor Helbing and Professor van der Hoven, as the only female candidate. Joining us from India, you'd done your master's thesis at St Andrews in Scotland, but the Netherlands was completely strange to you. We've seen you grow academically and as a person, always trying to keep everything under control. You'll soon learn that's not always possible, but you've managed up until now. With publications in renowned journals, presentations and interviews, you've experienced what it means to be persistent and not to be thwarted by minor and major obstacles on your academic path, life's path. But you've been wise. When encountering a challenge you didn't know how to embrace, you simply asked for advice and for help. Smart, admirable. You always listened. Doesn't mean you did what we said, but you listened. You weighed the arguments and proceeded the way you should do. That's a sign of strength. You listened and asked. You've used social media and other fora to inform others, non-scientists, of what you've accomplished in a very appropriate way, a very befitting way for you. Why? Because you really believe people need to understand the need for justice and fairness, to make people aware of advances in the field, to enable them to participate in today's society, to discover what the world has to offer. Other way around. Justice is the core of your research, but it's also, I believe, a core value of you as a human being. Admirable. In Delft, and Amsterdam, you've embraced life to its fullest. You've worked tremendously hard with an unbelievable drive. This has definitely brought you where you are, made you who you are. We can't imagine you leaving India as a young woman on her own to embark on your first adventure outside of India. That was St. Andrews, Professor Dobson. You mean you were surprised he remembered you? We weren't. Later in the Netherlands, having found funding for both of your endeavors completely on your own, having paved that path for yourself. Enough about academia. Most importantly, you're a very caring, kind, and thoughtful person, a very special person, social and open, sharing your experience with all, willing to help others when needed, always. We believe everyone in TBM knows you. Outside of TBM, St. Andrews, you're not easily forgotten. You're a very strong personality who embraced. You met Jos, thought about the future, invited us to India for your wedding, to share in your joy, making sure everything was organized, including clothing. I have a wonderful sari that I haven't been able to wear, but Professor Monnier actually made it. The pictures are amazing. A very unique and valued experience. I believe we're the only female Hindi priest in the country. You did well. And last but not least, your hiking trips in amazing places. On your own, with others, with yours, doesn't really matter. You've set out to exploring the world's wonders, and you're doing well. Very little stops you. As we've said earlier, you've grown. More than we think you actually realize yourself. You're an experienced academic now, with every reason to be proud of yourself and be self-confident. You've already embarked on your next scientific adventure as a postdoc within the civil engineering department here in Delft. Again, with numerous challenges, some of which you have already embraced, but remember, you're definitely equipped. You can do it. We wish you the very, very best and hope to continue to engage with you in many ways in the future. Congratulations.
Learned Dr. Banerjee. You now have the right to use the title of doctor. Your doctorate means that society can rely on your judgment, that you will act transparently and communicate independently about your results and about the social relevance of your work. In other words, your doctorate implies that you will uphold scientific integrity. I wish you a great deal of wisdom and prosperity with your new degree. On behalf of the Board of Doctorates and the Delft University of Technology, I congratulate you and your family on earning your doctoral degree. Dr. Banerjee, you may return to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your presence. I hereby close this academic session.
He will tell us what to do.
A small step to the right, please. Yeah, okay, that's perfect.